Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Professor Meg.
And today we're reviewing Kyoto no Neko from
Neko.
Today we're reviewing Kyoto no Neko from Matago.
Meow.
Is it Neko?
Neko.
I don't know at all. I've been calling it Kyoto no
no
Neko.
Neko.
Kyoto no Neko. Kyoto no Neko. I don't know anything. Kyoto no Neko from Matago. A 2 to 4 player. I think it's 2 to 4. Is it 1 to 4? 2 to 4. I did it right the first time.
I gotta be honest, shout out to whoever commented in our Gen Con hall because they corrected it.
Oh, that's what happened?
Yeah.
Kyoto
That's
no
how
Neko.
I learned.
I should read more comments. Kyoto no Neko from Matago. A surprisingly enough, a dungeon crawling game featuring
Yes.
cats. That's
Yes.
kind of what's going on here. This is a little bit of an interesting one to teach. We're going to get into it. It's not all what I thought. I looked at this cover. I was like, this game looks adorable. It looks amazing. You have cats. You're walking around the city. Look, there's little bikes. It's all great. It's all cool. It's a dungeon crawler. That's what this game is. This is a dungeon crawling experience where the cats are basically wandering around the village. They're facing off against other cats. They're escaping other dogs. They're facing off against the other dungeon crawler people, the adventurers, you know, these two over here. They're wandering into each other's base. They're uncovering various tokens and finding the adventures behind them. And they're leveling up their stats so they can be better in fights. This is a dungeon crawler disguised as a cute little cat game. I'm going to go ahead and dive into the general, slightly more specific way this game plays. Then we'll dive into the review. Timestamps everything timestamps as usual to everything down below. So, Kyoto no Neko is a 2 to 4 player dungeon crawler game. In the game, you're basically trying to get 5 bells before your opponent. Bells are going to be gathered from these objective cards. These are variable game to game. We'll talk a bit more about how this works later. But you have different objectives you can have. For example, I can climb a tree, and then I take one of my bells over here. I've gotten a bell, I put it on my little track over here, and when you get to 5, that's going to trigger endgame, and whoever has the most bells is going to win the game. Ties go to those with the most friendship. Because of course they do. But past that, you're going to be trying to gather bells from these various objective cards. You can cross a road, you can collect a butterfly as a friend, you can hunt a bird, or you can fight another player. Those are the 5 things you can do to get bells, but there's 2 more ways to get bells. You can also get bells from having more fights over here. So whenever you have your 4th fight in the game, that whether it's against another person or against the various birds in the game, you can go ahead and get a token. And then as Meg pointed out, your base over here, when you collect your 3rd friend, you get a bell. So your 1st friend will get you a bell, your 2nd friend will get you a cube stat upgrade, and your 3rd friend will get you a bell. So that's the way this works over here.
And those are variables, so it's not always making a friend.
Yep, they're going to be different. We'll talk more about that soon. But past that, in the game, what you're going to do is you're going to have a movement and an action. Every turn is movement and action. Your movement is going to start off with a movement stat that will grow as your cats grow. So you start off with 3 right now, but it could be variable depending on the board. But your cat's growing. Whenever a player gets their 2nd bell and their 4th bell, the cats are going to grow. Not every time, but the first person to reach their 2nd bell and the first person to reach their 4th bell will trigger all cats in the game to grow, and you'll get a bunch of stat upgrades along your board over here. So there are some ways to get them mid-game, but a big part of it is you're going to get stat increases as you level up your cats. But then what you're doing is you're moving, so let's say my movement stat of 3, I might go ahead and go 1, flipping this over, and then seeing what's over there, but then I have 2 more movement now. So in this case, the question is, what do I want to do? I could just stop and deal with this bird. I could fight it. The problem is it has a attack of 7 over here, which means I would need to roll this, add my archery, my hunt stat, and basically get a 7, which is impossible because this is not a 6-sided die. So that's guaranteed not to happen. Now the good news is either intentionally or unintentionally, when you fail a test over here, if I roll and try to go for it, that's a failure. 3 plus 1 is 4, I need to get 7, I will bump up my stat by 1. So you are always increasing your stats when you fail, and if you get a critical failure, meaning effectively this is always possible to fail. Even if you have 5 on your own tree against a 2, it's always possible to fail, but at least you go up 2 stat upgrades instead of just 1, so it does have that silver lining, so to speak. But if you're not doing that, if you decide to keep going, because I know I'm going to fail, it's not the best opportunity to do that, I could try to go ahead and cross the road. The problem is when you cross the road, the bikers are going to move. So right now, let's pretend I'm crossing the road, but I'm actually not going to. We'll walk it back in a second. Right now, we're going to have the grandma biker go 1, 2, 3, but because I stepped into the road, when she goes 1, 2, 3, she hits me, and I have to go ahead and roll for a 7 agility. I start with 1 agility right now, and I have to roll 6 and see my previous notes about how that's impossible on a die that only goes up to 3. So again, problems over there. So I would not have stepped into the road in this case. We'll let her go there anyway, but I would not have stepped into the road. Instead, I'll take my 2nd movement and go over here, flipping this over. That's a little easier. I actually have the possibility of getting that because I had 1 over here. So if I roll a 3, I could take that guy down. Now, the tricky part is the next places I can go is I can't go here. I could not cross the road. She's ahead of me, although again, that hypothetically didn't happen. Crossing the hedge requires you having 4 agility, and crossing rooftops requires you having 6 agility, so I can't do those. And that's not a skill test, you just have to have that agility to do so. So until your cats are agile enough, you can't cross hedges or roofs. So I could go down over here, or I could roll for that. I'll just go ahead and step 1 down, and boom, there's another bug. So I'm going to go ahead and take my 1 action. I'm going to roll, and I got a 3 plus 1. I got this, and this is going to be hunted. It's going to go on this track here. Now, it's not one of the birds. The birds are what I need to hunt to get the bell. So while this is helpful for me, it's not going to get me a bell right away. My turn's done. That's the dungeon crawling aspect. You're going to be wandering around the board. You're going to be exploring. You're going to be engaging with a variety of things in the game. So, for example, if Meg goes ahead in her turn and she flips this over, she now has a dog that she has to escape from. So you have to be mindful of the dogs in this game.
I think that was a friendship one.
That actually is from the that's a little.
Oh, that's the Shiba.
That's one from the scenarios, which we'll pretend isn't there. But we'll flip another one over here, and we got a cat that she's trying to fight over here instead. So this is a cat that you can either make friends with or fight with. Your choice in the game. They have different stat aspects for them. You'll occasionally run into dogs. You'll run into trees. Let me find a tree for you over here. If we found a tree somewhere. Where's a tree? Here's a tree. Pop down a tree. We're going to grab a 4 agility tree and pop into the board. And now cats can climb those trees in order to look at other tiles around the board and also fulfill this quest over here. And so you're trying to wander around the board. You're trying to take actions. As you get bells, the cats are going to level up. And as you get to your 5th bell, that's going to trigger endgame. And either you or someone else who gets ahead of you will win at the end of the game. And that is the basic game of Kyoto no Neko. But when you're done with that, there are scenarios. Scenarios are going to add a whole bunch of different things to the game, including variable scoring cards. So these scoring cards over here, these are pretty easy starting off, but you will get more complicated scoring cards added to the game with higher things you need to do, harder things you need to do, finding specific friends, as you saw over here. This is a specific friend from one of the scenarios, and they're going to introduce new ways to do things in the game, new objectives you're trying to go through, possible rules alterations, and so when you're done with the basic game, you have further ways to explore by diving into the scenarios one at a time, and then figuring out what you want to do after, even mixing and matching whatever cards you want to build your own scenarios to a degree or to build your own scoring combinations of the cards that show up. And that is Kyoto no Neko, which means it's time for a review, which we're going to talk about what we like, don't like, and can see others not liking, starting off with what we like.
Oh, well, what did I like about this game? I liked a lot of things. I think that it's very engaging. I'm sorry, guys, because there's quite a few things, but I really enjoyed that there is a tile on every space, that you're interacting with every single space. So as you're exploring, even though everyone starts off at different areas of the map, you're really interacting with everything as you choose your path through. And then something else that's also very clever about the design of the map is the, and I forget, it's hedges and...
rooftops.
Rooftops. Between the hedges and the rooftops, you can see that there's a lot of zigzags in here that you'll have to start maneuvering in really clever ways, or you'll have to move up your agility to be able to just jump over those different things. But the beginning of the game can seem very friendly because everyone starts off in their own area and you're kind of uncovering your own things. But as soon as everyone crosses the street into the central area, it does become a free-for-all. And another thing that happens is when you fail checks, usually it's other players that are moving the things away from you or moving you. And that's also very... I don't want to say cutthroat because it doesn't feel cutthroat, but it's very...
It's a drop of cutthroat.
Brawly. It feels more brawly because everyone's doing it to each other. So it's not as much like a... I don't feel like it's cutthroat.
It's not take that.
Right, but it is very much, everyone is just jumping ahead with each other.
Yeah, I mean, we've had times in the game where somebody's trying to capture a bird for their final bell, and they fail, and the next person moves the bird to their person, they fail, the next person moves the bird to their person. There's a lot of trying to take...
Or you move it onto a dog, and then for them to be able to do the friendly thing, they also have to fight and do the dog thing.
There's moments of enjoyment as you get in each other's way. This is a cute and charming game. That's where it starts for me. The game, the art pulled me in. This box is what pulled me into the game initially. I thought the box looked great. I like Matago as a publisher. I just figured, why not? Let's try this one out. And when I figured out more about what the game was, I was both more intrigued and less intrigued. I was like, this feels like it might be a little light, and it is, we'll come to that, but in general, the sheer theme pulls you in. Like what you're doing with this little cat who's wandering around the city, crossing roads, avoiding bikes, engaging with anything, and engaging with bugs that you're trying to kill, birds you're trying to kill, butterflies you're trying to weirdly befriend. Like you bring your butterflies back home, and then you get friendship points, kind of, sort of, for it, which feels a little dark in its own way, but it is what it is. Getting involved with other cats where you can get either friendship points for the cats or fight them, and then fighting other players too. You can go up to another player and fight them, although you have to be careful when you do so because they might win and they might get the trophy. So you need to be very, very mindful about like what your stats are in the game as you try to approach any of these things. Go ahead.
I think that something, just because you're hitting on it, I think that also makes it a very accessible dungeon crawler, that it's almost like a gateway dungeon crawler.
Yeah.
Because when you were throwing a game at someone and you were saying things like the Legion and the Elves and, you know, things that they're not very familiar with, and you're attacking and deflecting and things like that and counterspell, that can be a lot at someone. But something like this, it's very clear. Like, you are befriending, like, you're doing something that you would just naturally know you would do anyway. You're like, I'm a cat, I uncovered a tree, I would probably climb it, and you can.
And then you get a bell for climbing it.
And I think it really introduces people to both, like, the board dungeon crawling aspect and as well as the different stat blocks, because there are these preset characters which I have showing, and then Alex has the regular side where you build your own. And I think that this also is like a great introduction to someone of stat blocks, because you're not saying things like charisma and wisdom. You're saying, you know, friendship, hunting, fighting, agility. That's it. So I think that it is really, really great in that sense.
Yeah, I think the base game is very accessible. For me, what takes us to the next level, though, what does add a lot more replayability, is the scenarios. The scenarios take a game which can be a little light, we'll get into it in things I don't like, but then adds it to the, well, let's see what you're playing now. Let's see what new rules are in play. Let's see what new cards are in play. What new things you're trying to do. Oh, look at that. You're trying to wander into your opponent's base and get a little spawn, spend a turn on in their area there. That's going to change the way you play the game and gives you different things to go for, and also mindfulness as far as where you're trying to interact. Or again, even like some of the first scenarios will have you trying to, like I said, making friends with, was it Shiva? Whoever it was. Shiva. You're making friends with, like, this dog who's in the middle of the
Maybe
board.
It is Shiva.
Whoever it is. You're making friends, you're wandering around.
I think it is Shiva.
The scenarios introduce new things to the game that mix up the experience even further as you go through it. And so there's a lot of charm going on in this game. There's a lot of accessibility in the dungeon crawler. There is a lot of luck, we'll talk about that, but there's a lot of stat upgrades so you can feel more prepped. And you also get chunks. Leveling up in the game is satisfying because someone gets their third bell, well, second bell and fourth bell, and then boom, you suddenly get, you know, a whole bunch of upgrade cubes on your stats, and you're like, look at that, I suddenly can take down that bird that has been, like, taunting me this whole game, which I guess is thematically appropriate. But it's just a cute, accessible game with a lot of fun things being thrown your way, and then scenarios to mix up the gameplay all at the same time, while there is enough strategy to try to think through how you're trying to approach things.
That was exactly another thing I wanted to bring up, was that everyone levels up together. Yep. So even though you're not getting closer toward your end goal, you're not getting closer toward victory with points, you're still staying as strong as everyone else. So I think, again, as like a gateway dungeon crawler, it keeps everyone in the same playing field.
Yeah. If anything, it's almost the opposite of the Wish Gets Wisher. It's a little bit of a catch mechanic in the sense that as you accomplish things that drive you closer to your goal, you have fewer opportunities for those final bells. So like at the end of the game, you might have 2 or 3 things you're able to do, versus if someone who's further behind still has a lot more flexibility of like all the things they can do to get a bell. So it's not really catch up, but it keeps that pace pretty neck and neck.
Yeah.
As far as things you don't like in the game?
You know what, Alex?
Nothing?
Anything I complained about would be just me digging for something.
You're allowed to dig for things. You don't have to.
I know. Like, honestly, the only small thing I would say is I wish there was, like, a little bit more variability with the tokens. That every token you have goes out, besides the ones you switch out for the modules, which I understand maybe that's kind of hard to do balancing-wise with, like, the different types, but that's like me, like, trying.
Wow.
Is wanting more variability in the tokens. Before we say anything else, too, these are, like, squishy. They're squishy erasers. Cats, and they're the cats that you get, and they move around. We're not sure they're erasers, but we think they're erasers.
They feel like erasers.
Yeah, and if you use them as an eraser, we could ruin them, so we're not going to. But they're so cute. They're really nice.
For me, I have a few smaller things. First of all is the game. I mean, the game says on the box, so it's not like they didn't warn us. But this is a 35-minute game. I do find that, especially the basic game, before you dive into scenarios, it can go quickly. Like, can happen very, very quickly. You can have turn 1 where you're already leveling up. First turn, boom, I got 2 bells, now it's time to level up. And that pace doesn't give you a lot of time to really react to things, so you're kind of just aggressively doing the things. Like, as much as you can get a bell through the 4th fight, or can get a friend through the 3rd fight, until you start mixing up those goals, and it will change once you start mixing those up, but until you do, very often the goals are just the fastest way to the bells, and so you're like, I just have to get 5 bells. Boom, 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 boom. You're going to try to do what you can. Boom. 35 minutes later, the game's over. It is a fast-paced game that can be a little too fast. And then as well as that, it's a lighter game. There's a lot of, there is strategy, there are decisions, but it's definitely a lighter game combined with dice rolling where you can have all the stats you need and still have a critical failure and all that, or have like a 1 in 6 chance, I think it's actually 1 in 3, because I think there's 2 3s. It's forgiving. There are 2 3s in here. So you always like you can just get that best roll, whatever it is, and be able to get whatever it is you're trying to befriend or hunt or fight or whatever it is. So it's definitely a little on the lighter side, and it can go very, very quickly, which does take a little away from my experience. Again, the scenarios help with both of those, but this is a game where I definitely recommend if you enjoy it at all, play the scenarios and go past the first game to see what else is in it. As far as final thoughts, I'm a little nervous about where you're going with this
I know,
one.
here's the funny thing, you guys. I don't have many bad things to say about it, but I am going to give it a 4.5.
Yeah.
And I think that's because I don't have many things I don't like about it, but to me, I do want, like, just a little bit more, and I'm not sure what that more is, and I think it's a longer game. I think that it's a way, because there are the different modules, and it can change what you do, but it doesn't really change how far you can get with your cat. Like, I want one that you need, like, 7 trophies or something, like you said, so that you end up befriending people and fighting a certain amount of time or things like that.
And full transparency sake, we have not played all the modules yet, all the scenarios, so if something does that exact thing, we don't know.
Right, I'm not sure. I don't think this ever changes, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my only thing, is that I know I want just, like, a little bit more from it, and I think it is, like, a slightly longer game that adds, so that way you get to use a bit more strategy and have payoff from it, but I really think it's a really good game.
Yeah. I'm coming in not that far behind you. I'm coming in at a 4 out of 5 over here. I do like it a lot. I'm surprised by how much I enjoy it. It is much lighter this is much lighter than what I would typically enjoy in this class. I think that the sheer charm of the game, the accessibility, the fact that I can play this with my kids and have fun, and I've also played this at game night and had people requesting a back-to-back game of this at full game night with my friends. So, like, it does work on many levels. The scenarios keep it interesting. Oh, we haven't even talked about these.
Your little bits go in here. At the end of the game, it was like, okay, what are these boxes for? And it's all your little bits go in it. That's all. It's cute, but
beautiful production, simple rules, accessible game, and variable gameplay all do pretty well for this one.
Yeah.
Kyoto no Neko, a 4 out of 5 for me, 4.5 for you, and recommendation time. You have recommendations?
I do. So this is an oldie, but this very much reminded me of a newer Mice and Mystics. That one has you play through scenarios, so you're going through more of a story, but it's very much a dungeon crawler. It's actually co-op, though. So it is co-op, but you're playing as cats fighting off against rats and things like that.
Yeah, for me, I had Catacombs of Karak, which is I think they actually came out with a new version. I've only played the older version, but Catacombs of Karak is a family-friendly, kid-friendly dungeon crawler, which, again, similar to this one, is kind of fun despite itself. It's like it's targeting a younger audience, but you're still able to run around the dungeon, gather various things, heal yourself at wells, and ultimately try to gather what you need as you level up to take down the big bads in the dungeon. That is basically that. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co.
I'm Professor Meg.
And have a good one.
Bye.